That is USA, whether it is absolutely ready for the Rugby World Cup 2031. Now, why did this subject come up? I know we've talked about this, has been talked to death. Oh my God, is the USA going to be able to get it? Are we going to have it? Well, there's a conversation that happened on a podcast known as The Good, The Bad, and The Rugby, was featuring Dan Lyles of AEG Rugby, former USA Rugby legend himself, and then Gareth Reese. And they were proposing this question, and let me show you what it's about first, and then we'll talk about it next.
Is it going to happen? Is the next 8 years going to see fully fit, fully firing, and properly competitive US and Canada teams arrive at 2031? Or are we all still going to be here in another 8 years?
The moment that the US Eagles didn't qualify for this World Cup, genuinely wanted them to be there because they're our cousins and we suffer the same stuff. That was huge because it actually did shine a proper light. We're actually going to hold a World Cup in France, and Canada and US aren't going to be there. First time Canada's missed, US has only missed one other time. So yes, I think the conversations are real. I think especially World Rugby and a few of the other partners, and people are talking to us that haven't talked to us before. I genuinely think that the dialogue's there, but there's got to be commitment alongside it. We've seen it in the women's game, just to mention that again. I mean, there's been some real growth, and there's actually a bit of a plan there. But in the men's game, there's so many forces. I think the question's a fair one. Are we going to be able to identify a strategy, but then execute and get the right parties in behind it? Because the North American strategy is a must because of where we're going for a World Cup in 2 stops, and it's going to pay off.
Now, for me, this is one that I'm a little bit pushed on one side and the next simply because of the fact that I don't think that there is a requirement that you need to be great at rugby to be able to do the Rugby World Cup in the US. I do think that there is something in terms of being able to have a conversation about having the Rugby World Cup US ready for the Rugby World Cup to enter, but not necessarily a USA rugby, team that's ready. Obviously, we're going to be automatically, added in regardless because we're host country. So that's not going to ever be the issue. But I think there is something that's been brought up, and it's something that, like I said, I'm going to say my opinion on it and on where it is. When it comes to the Rugby World Cup, for 2031, the idea for this is, the USA has one of the richest populations by terms of economy, not necessarily per person, but by terms of economy, one of the richest nations, by terms of the potential of population. We have that as well, too, more or less in potential of population. And of course, we have the element of having a infrastructure as a US that can handle major events as this, and they can also create pop culture developments almost in the same guise as, even though for us as NFL fans we always knew he was, but a Travis Kelce connecting with a Taylor Swift. By definition, Travis Kelce is already famous, but you add it with a Taylor Swift, and all of a sudden there's an escalation in the knowledge and the credibility of the personality and the player as more than just this one insular niche product. So what we're seeing with World Rugby and wanting to bring it to the US is that same exact guys. Now, the problem that I'm having with the argument and the conversations are that on one hand of it, I think there's too many people that feel like the US would not be a good testing ground simply because rugby is not in the same guise as maybe France or New Zealand or something like that. And then on the other hand, I think there's the conversation of our exaggeration of who we are as a USA rugby community in bed. Not to say that we don't have passionate fans. We legitimately do. But it's about what our actual numbers are. From my position, I think both arguments are obviously faulty. From those who are outside the country and think that the USA isn't the ground to do it, honest to God, it doesn't matter whether there's USA fans or not. You have an economy, you have a media base that by leaps and bounds will do numbers on what the Rugby World Cup will do. If doing Japan, that is one of the media beds. It's not even a rugby country. I need people to understand, when you went to the Rugby World Cup in Japan, it didn't get popular because Japan's a rugby country. It got popular because they managed to be such amazing service, and they had prepped the population for it. But the rugby itself, even though now Japan's, a tier 1 country, but the population as a whole, outside of a certain component of Tokyo, really was not knowledgeable for the Rugby World Cup, and they just educated them really within 2-3 years. They really educated them a whole lot. So there's not this need where it's like, well, the USA didn't make the Rugby World Cup in 2023, so we have no idea whether or not we're going to be able to field anything together for 2031. No. That will be honestly, if you can do well in Paris with all the bed bugs and everything that was happening over there, and you think just because France is number 1 team that it shot it up, like, question the numbers. I'm just saying, question those numbers, because it's a different situation. I know they had it, but I think a lot of those numbers are based off of inflation. But if you think that can happen there and not in the US, you're crazy. You're absolutely crazy. Like, you're coming into it in the 3 years after the Olympics. It's going to be what, 5 years after the after the World Cup. It is going to be within another proximity of the Women's Rugby World Cup, the Women's World Cup. Like, the momentum is going to be more than enough there. The question is, are you going to do the marketing correctly to get there? That has nothing to do with USA Rugby's performance capabilities. Whether we make it or perform there or not is neither here nor there. It is, what is the story that's going to lead into it? How do we exaggerate it and make sure that World Rugby is attaching with the partners needed to build the exaggeration of the Rugby World Cup? Because it's a nations game. Like, as long as it's national, the USA is going to be all in for it one way or another. That's neither here nor there, right? It's going to be in for it. But we need to know what is that next move. Now, in terms of what we're talking about from USA Rugby, this is something that Dan Lyle said, and I want to speak in on this one just to show a point here. So let's look at what Dan Lyle was.
I saw so many Americans, the legends that sell the merchandise. They said despite U.S. not being there, there are 30 million identifiable fans in the United States.
Wow.
In the expat world and the rugby world, I saw so many Americans, the legends that sell the merchandise. They said the second most profitable market for them is the United States, and they were missing the United States in this World Cup on the ground by way of merchandise sales.
Randomly, I sat next to, in both semis and quarters, I sat next to someone from America, one from South Carolina and one from Arizona. And I was like, why are you even here? They said, well, we love rugby.
So what you guys don't realize is that without a Six Nations or whatever you got in your country, North America, this is it. This is the pinnacle. And we need to change that. We need to have other pinnacle destination events so the South Carolina fan can come support something on their own continent.
I heard something, it's 3.9% of the USA population are rugby fans, which doesn't sound like much, but then you put it into 400 million people, it's almost 16 million people who love rugby. And if you put 16 million people on a rugby geographic map, that's just the biggest country in the world.
Yeah, so that's where I go back to. I don't like us playing with these numbers, because the 16 million fans, hey man, we have yet to see that on any demarcation. Like 3.9% is wild. I would make an argument that we probably are under 1% of the US population in terms of fandom. Like, it would be wild to think that we're anywhere close to it. So I get a little bit iffy when it comes to that. And again, it doesn't mean that it can't get there or that we don't need to have those, that we can't get the number. I'm just saying that we need to not act like that's an actual fact and not just a estimation based off of like a culmination of events that we've played, registration at an end, and then like, you know, social media and that, like, yo, 16 million is wild. Because if we had 16 million, we would be still low, but it would be far more on par with more more production and sales merch that goes through to different tournaments and games. I'm just saying, like, this, it's why I don't think we need to play either way. All our job is that we need to make sure that we are creating the best storyline, the best entertainment. We are literally needing to blow the Rugby World Cup out of the water in comparison to any other nation that's done, not in performance on the field, but in presentation of the game. I mean, it needs to be 2012 Beijing introduction, mesmerizing altogether. It needs to be like, yo, the Olympics, what? No, we came with it. And that is where our goal is. That's what the USA is legitimately capable of doing. And that'll be able to bring fans. I know we did this, we talked about this with the 1996 World Cup when it came to Atlanta, and that was kind of the opening for major league soccer and that. But again, there was already kind of a push that was going towards it. So, you know, it's not the same thing, even though it feels like you're talking the same network. But it's not the same thing. And I just want these arguments to be deaded that the US should lose it. Like, World Rugby definitely needs us. It definitely needs the USA to be able to support itself and surpass the 6 billion, arguably, that it did. Well, really, it did like 2 billion in Japan and made like another 4 billion, arguably, in attention for the economy of Japan, something to that effect. So they're using that as a measurement item, and I don't know what the numbers are for Paris. They're saying it's larger, but again, I don't know. I'd have questions. Great finals, great ending. Obviously, we know how it all went. In my opinion, probably one of the better ones. But again, was the interest fully there? How much was it really promoted? I don't feel like it was promoted overtly well. But again, I'm in the U.S. and actually I was in Brazil in that one. So, you know, it's to be determined when it comes to that. But that argument, dead it. You need to get it there, but we need to do our part in not just educating the population, but making sure that we put on the best show ever. Let me know what your guys' thoughts on this are. You know, I want to see where you guys are going with each one of these, and of course, you know, what is your feelings for the future of the Rugby World Cup for 2031 and then subsequent 2033 for the Women's Rugby World Cup? Like, do you guys feel like the USA can be ready within the next, what, we're talking 2023, in the next 9 years? Actually, let's keep it a buck, keep it up almost 8 years before it's able to go. Your thoughts, man. Let me know your thoughts on it.
I ain't convinced.